Okay, so here we go. Welcome to Great Taste. I'm your host, Steve Boss. Thanks for joining us. I want to start by just giving you a little background about my two guests. On September 12th, 2017, New York Times restaurant reviewer critic Pete Wells caused quite a stir with his latest review. The review's title was, "Is New York's Best Pizza in New Jersey?" And I remember very well reading this article and going, oh my, I have got to get to this place. Now, unfortunately, I haven't yet, but I still have plans to. But anyway, the pizza that was served at this particular restaurant, he described in these words: exquisite sensitivity to the needs of the dough. The crust had no soggy or underbaked patches, and the bottom surface was crisp all the way from the puffy outer lip to the inner tip, which would just straight out or nearly straight when I picked up a slice. When I tore open the outer rim, the crust crackled, and the white interior steamed soft, somewhat springy, with a slow building, many layered, lively flavor underlined by sea salt. Okay, if you're not hungry yet, I'm ready to get on a plane and get going. Anyway, that pizza was the creation of Dan Richer and his team at Razza in Jersey City, and I'm thrilled to welcome Dan to Great Taste. He's the author of the new book, The Joy of Pizza, Everything You Need to Know, and I'm doubly fortunate that his co-author, Katie Parla, is also alongside. You may be familiar with Katie, who is based in Rome. She's written numerous cookbooks, is a culinary educator, TV host, co-host Gola, a podcast about Italian food culture. And I can tell you, without a doubt, if you listen to that podcast, you're going to learn a lot every time you have a new episode that you can play. She was a guest on Great Taste previously when her last book, Tales of the Italian South, came out. And I want to thank both of you for taking the time to discuss the joy of pizza.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Steve.
Pleasure. Let's start with a little background about you, Dan, because the way you opened the book with the story of why pizza memories dwell deep inside your DNA really sets the scene for how the entire book is a love story, really, conceived initially around your family table and in booths at various local pizzerias.
Yeah. So my pizza journey definitely starts, like most, in my childhood, running errands with my mom, my dad, and just eating our way through life. Pizza was on our table at least once or twice a week, not to mention the occasional lunch slice of pizza. Every birthday party and baseball game and soccer game and school lunches. So much of our childhood is based around pizza. And my first job was as a busboy in an Italian restaurant when I was 15. I was a waiter at 17, and then I started managing restaurants in college. In college, I started my college career at New Jersey's agriculture school, part of Rutgers University, because it's the only college I got into. I didn't want to have anything to do with agriculture. So after 3 years of that, I transferred within Rutgers and got a degree, but I skipped my graduation ceremony because I had this love for an adventure, and my cousin was studying architecture in Rome. So I hopped on a flight and traveled throughout Italy from top to bottom. And I came home from that trip knowing exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, which was own a restaurant. So I started to cook. I started to buy ingredients from farmers markets. And that's when the agriculture kind of came back into my life, because I was going to farmers markets and talking to farmers, and I could have an intelligent conversation with a farmer about the very real struggles that they have. And I learned so much, and I could actually participate by supporting their products, and their products always tasted better than something that I could find at a supermarket. Then I bought a failing restaurant when I was 26. It happened to have 2 wood-fired ovens and a really bad pizza recipe. So I started focusing on pizza, and I have not stopped learning and growing and trying new things. It's a constant process of learning and experimentation, and all in the pursuit of making the best possible pizza that I can, specifically because the better our pizza is, the happier we make our guests.
I can't argue with that. So let's talk about your co-author. I don't know how familiar people are with the book publishing industry, listeners and viewers, but there was a time when co-authors were never mentioned. There was a time when they were, mentioned somewhat if they had to be mentioned. And now more and more, I think that co-authors are being recognized for the role that they play. And I really wanted to write because it struck me as a very important aspect of the entire creative process here. I wanted to read actually what you wrote, Dan, in the acknowledgements. Katie, Parla, thank you for your friendship and support over the past decade. When I decided I was ready to write a book, you were my very first phone call. You have held my hand through the entire process, and there's no one on earth who would have been a better book partner than you. This book would not exist without you. So what was that like? I mean, I remember, I think I saw videos of you guys working together, baking pizzas and mixing dough and everything when you were doing this whole project. So what was it like for you, Katie, to be involved in this particular project?
Well, I believe intensely in what Dan does and how he confronts pizza and how he sees it as a fundamental part of the community and as part of his family. And so it was a no-brainer to work together. What I didn't expect is a partnership that was so fluid and so symbiotic, because it doesn't seem like real life at times. There are always like bumps along the way when you're collaborating with people, even friends, but this was like the most seamless, exciting, fun, challenging experience, and like a real privilege and highlight of my professional life. And Dan is such a brilliant mind, and there's no reason that he should devote 1 second of his time and attention to like a Word document when I can handle that. So it's the sort of ideal situation where, like, because of our friendship and because of how much I have learned from Dan and how much I just am passionate about pizza, it's like it became kind of easy to put into words what we needed to communicate to the reader in order to make this book something that wasn't esoteric or unapproachable, but instead really was like us, like regular Jersey people just trying to get you to eat pizza, but also smart at the same time.
Right. And I want to get into that whole aspect. Before, I'm really curious, as a transplant living in Rome for quite a while now, what was this actually like for you in terms of your experience with the Italian world of pizza, and just has it influenced your whole thinking process, for example, about pizza in any particular way? Did you come back to Italy after you finished working on the project, or in between while you were working on the project, and have a different outlook? I'm just fascinated to know.
Well, that's a great question. I live in a place where there are a lot of pizza styles that are pretty dogma driven, the Neapolitan style being the main one. But I would say about a decade ago, certain individuals started to emerge with their own unique vision of what pizza is. And I'll evoke Franco Pepe of Pepe and Grani here, which is a place that Dan and I visited together, where you have someone who's ostensibly making Neapolitan pizza, but is doing it in a way that is actually quite transgressive, because he's prioritizing agriculture and the individuals who are actually involved in the process of growing the wheat and stretching the mozzarella. And in a way, like I see Dan and Franco as like very analogous figures. The pizza that Dan makes is not New York style, it's not Trenton style. It's really like this sort of artisanal American style, but really unique to Dan's vision of what pizza textures and flavors can be, in the same way that Franco Pepe is working, within a framework of a pizza tradition, and then making choices in order to tweak it so that it's something even like something better than you can ever imagine from the original model. So, living in Italy, eating pizza every single day, every style, all the time, thinking about pizza constantly, it's natural that, collaborating with Dan would start me thinking about certain things, especially like fermentation and flour choices and things like that. But I think, what we did as part of an ongoing conversation within the pizza industry that we were both thinking about on several levels.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I started thinking a lot about, as I was reading through the book, I was thinking about what is it that distinguishes this book about pizza from the plethora of books about pizza that are on the market. and that continue to always come out on the market. And I came up with a number of things that I would just like to throw out to you guys, and hopefully we can talk to some of them. Because I think the title actually, and this book is for everybody. It's for home cooks. It's specifically designed for them. And it's step by step. It's really very precise in terms of the photographs, the illustrations, the directions, the QR codes, everything that goes into it. So that's great. It's highly approachable. But I think that talking about it as a pizza book specifically, for me, actually puts limitations on it. Because in reality, this book's a valuable source of information on many different ingredients, processes, everything that goes into making food in a kitchen, not just pizza. Flour, salt, olive oil, tomatoes, cheese, other toppings, wood-fired ovens, wood, making and maintaining a starter, techniques and recipes for caramelizing onions, making meatballs, various tomato sauces. I mean, it's just on and on, really. And so I really would like to communicate that to everybody who listens and watches, that yeah, it's the joy of pizza. And there's not much more, for me anyway, that expresses joy in the world than pizza, but it's a lot more than that. And so I can't wait. I've already learned so much just by reading it through once. And I know that once I can really take more time to get into it, I'm going to learn a lot more about many, many different topics. So here are some of the things that I feel like really make it stand out. And we can talk about them in any way you want. First, rubrics. What in the heck are rubrics? I don't even know if I ever heard of the word or remember hearing of the word before. And there's a rubric about pizza evaluation. Matter of fact, you can't even eat your pizza after you bake it until you've evaluated it. And then there's a tomato rubric, an olive oil rubric, a mozzarella rubric. And I'm just going to go through these, and then we can just handle them however you guys want to approach them. Detailed and progressive photos that allow the reader to follow each step, and illustrations, follow each step of the process. I mentioned this already, the use of QR codes so that the reader can actually watch videos to see how the different techniques are applied. I thought that was ingenious. I really liked it. And everybody has a smartphone, so it's really approachable and easy to access. And then for me, probably the most, I don't know what the right word is actually, incisive, astounding, beautiful aspect of this book was the whole idea of intentions, the idea of naming your intention. And so, matter of fact, I know I said I'll let you guys do it, but let's start there, because I want you to explain, Dan, why it's critical to the success of pizza making, or I'll editorialize in saying any action we might undertake, to have an intention at the beginning.
Definitely. I think it's so important to really identify what you're trying to produce or what you're trying to learn in a specific technique, right? Pizza making is a rather long process from the minute you start gathering your ingredients and mixing your dough to the time you finally bake the pizza. Can be 48, 72 hours. And each step in the process is no more important than another step. So the way we mix the dough, to the fermentation time and the different techniques for fermentation and topping the pizza and baking the pizza, really wanted to identify each step of the process and explain what it is that we're trying to accomplish with this step of the process. Because when we say, like, let's just make pizza, it's such a long and arduous process that we had to break it down and explain why something is important.
Mm-hmm. And then so you have a general intention at essentially the start of each process, but then there are more specific ones as you move to other parts of the process. And I found that to be just what I thought when I was reading was that it just really helps the baker, the cook, maintain the focus on the process and refocus if necessary even.
Exactly.
Okay, so where do you want to jump in terms of, let's talk about rubrics, because my granddaughter passed me a note saying, what are rubrics?
Rubrics are a way to evaluate something. So when I was starting the pizza process of learning about pizza, it was overwhelming. The choices that we can make each step of the way has an impact on the final product. So the rubrics are a way to identify what's important and then to figure out how to get there. Like, let's say tomatoes, there's so much information and marketing that goes into what tomatoes you should buy. Do you buy San Marzano? Do they have to be Italian? Do they have to be whole peeled? There's so much information in the conversation that I needed a way for me to determine objectively what is the most delicious tomato. So I worked with tomato growers and tomato canners to determine what a tomato actually is. Like, what are the characteristics that make up a delicious or a not delicious tomato? And there's maybe 7 or 8 characteristics, from the texture, the positive flavor attributes, negative flavor attributes, the acidity, the sweetness, the color, the texture. Those are the characteristics that make up a tomato. So if we rate the tomato on those individual merits as we're tasting them, and we taste in a double-blind manner, so you don't know where they come from, you don't know who made them, and at the end of the tasting, you have a clear winner of the one that you liked the best, and that's the tomato you should use, no matter where it came from or who grew the tomatoes or how they were grown. It's just a way to kind of weed through all the noise. Mm-hmm. So we did
that. And to really send all that marketing that tells you have to have 00 flour, which we don't even recommend, and that you have to have Italian ingredients, which is really a kind of rejection of Italian cooking sensibilities anyway, to use a ton of imported stuff just because someone tells you with some advertising that's what to do.
And so, when you bring that all down to what and how it fits practically into a home cook's lifestyle, I think one of the basic principles also is that, as Pete Wells said, Razza dresses its pies with local ingredients so distinctive that every time I've eaten there, I've learned something about New Jersey farms. And probably all of us, no matter where we live, we could apply that principle to what we cook, supporting our local growers, CSAs, local millers. These are all points that you're making in the book, that this is how your entire philosophy of, we'll say, the ecology of food fits into the actual product that you put onto the table.
And I think the rubrics also get you really in touch with your senses. So you can say all you want. I'm going to go to the farmer's market because that's the good thing to do, and I feel great and ethical about that. Awesome. But if you're not reflecting on how the food tastes and, objectively assessing that this in-season eggplant or tomato is discernibly more intense or less watery or sweeter, more acidic, then it's just a performance in a way. So this is making it, I think, easier for people to identify why those ingredients are the ones that you should devote your precious time to seeking out. And it gives a kind of vocabulary to exploring them.
Yes. And, it's also great. I thought I sent the mozzarella. I just took a picture. I'm sorry. I took a picture of just that little section of the mozzarella and sent it to our local guy he has a farm and he has an organic dairy and has had for many, many years. And he makes fresh mozzarella.
What's the name
Francis
of it?
Dickey Radiance Dairy.
Awesome.
And so I sent it to him because I thought it could be helpful. And he sent me a note back and said, boy, a lot to think about. He loved the yellow part about the color, because that's one of the things that's in the book, is they saying that the real mozzarella should have some yellow tint to it because it shows the cows are eating fresh grass. And he's found that to be a tough thing in the marketplace because his mozzarella does look like that. What's wrong with it? People are asking, right? Because they're so used to commercially produced mozzarella, which is just pure white, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so there's all these rubrics for these different essential ingredients. We'll say the tomato, the olive oil, the mozzarella, the actual overall pizza evaluation rubric itself, and these are really just keys into the world, the little different worlds of each of these parts, and allows you, as Katie said, to really get more up close and personal, I think, with those ingredients. And the reason that I love this is, I think one of the reasons is that it all just reflects back on the whole title of the book, The Joy of Pizza, because what you're doing is you're taking everybody on a real journey. It's not something perfunctory. It's something that has so many different moving parts to it. And I could easily see people go, oh, this is so difficult. But the real way to approach it is, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah. It really opens up. It's a whole world out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just think it's so interesting. And I kind of get to guide people through that journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love the rubrics also because they're a way of helping people develop their palate. Mm. It's very similar to tasting different wines. The first time you taste red wine is you're not going to really understand the nuance and the provenance and all the different attributes of it. But the more you drink and the more you taste and the more you talk about it, mm-hmm. and the more you talk about it with people who have developed their palate, that's when you start to pick up on the nuance of that product, whether it's wine or a tomato. But mm-hmm. the more we learn about it, the more we taste, tend to pick up those subtle details. And I love subtle details.
Well, and it's also.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, it might seem like involved and you got the rubrics and all the things, but your reward is the most delicious pizza you've ever had mm-hmm. in your home oven.
Yeah, that's a real key point. And I also really appreciated what you said, that what you wrote. One concept I've embraced at Razza is that we are part of a community of food makers. We are not farmers and we are not millers, so we entrust experts in those fields with growing grain and milling flour for us, not to mention analyzing the flour for specs and safety. After a few experiments with mediocre home milling results, I learned an important lesson. Just because something is homemade doesn't mean it's great. And I loved, as I said, I love that. And it brought me back to a moment where I was at this coffee shop in Sarasota several years ago. And it's a great coffee shop. And I asked them specifically, I was like, why don't you guys roast your own coffee? And the answer was exactly the same. There are other people who are much better at that than we are. They're experts. We want to use their expertise and use their product, support them in their efforts, and then you're going to have a better cup of coffee. So
exactly, because they can focus on their process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, really wonderful. Okay, so just because I like technology, how did that whole thing end up in there? QR codes and.
I think I was like, let's do QR codes.
That was simple.
It's very organic.
Right.
Yeah, because, I've written a bunch of books about baking, and I was spending a lot of time watching Dan do his techniques. And I'm like, you know what? I am a wordsmith of sorts, but I can only explain to a certain extent stretch and folds and pre-shaping. And the photographs are exceptional. Of course, Eric Wolfinger is very talented, but the actual movement of it is different than seeing a kind of comic strip of images. And, Dan has just such natural flowing movements, and also is also really, really good on camera and like great at like making all these concepts down. You really are down to earth. So it felt like the best companion to the words and the photos to also have that video component. And you can of course go online and watch a zillion YouTube videos. But if you're like trying to make pizza and you get on YouTube, you're going to spend 5 hours on YouTube instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing. So right. Here we can like focus people, provide them with the information that they need in a way that like, I think also reinforces one of the things that I love most about the book is that like Dan has a family, the whole family gets involved. You can do this too. Like you get the sense that you're like in his home and it feels warm. And that I think draws even more people closer to the book and its recipes.
And I think it's also really a key point about cooking in general, that a lot of people say, well, I don't even know where to start, or I don't even know how, or I've got 3 kids and I don't have this time, or we all work full time. But the whole aspect of approaching it from involving the family is really one of the great keys to enjoying home cooked food, because you just get everybody involved. And I know, for example, it works. Let's put it that way. It's easy. So, Katie, I'm glad you brought up that was one of the things that you liked the most about the book. Dan, what about you? Just one aspect that really strikes you as far as the book itself, in terms of why do you really get excited about it when you think about this book?
So for me, it's the culmination of 20 years of making pizza, and I get to share that knowledge because there was a lot of trial and error, and mostly error. And I'm hoping that this book enables home bakers, but also professionals, to not make the same mistakes that I made and not spend the next 20 years starting from scratch. Hopefully everyone uses this book in a way to make great pizza now, and then they take it to another level in the future, and without having to start from the beginning.
Okay, so let's start from the very beginning in terms of how this book, how the approach can be made to pizza making. And there certainly are several basic ingredients that go into pizza. And maybe we should start with flour. And I'll just read one section from the book. When selecting flour for pizza making, as with all ingredients, I highly recommend working with flour that is consistently available to you. Dough making and pizza baking are a practice. If you work with the same flour over time, you can methodically improve on the quality of your dough, because you aren't having to constantly account for new variables, and can instead focus on dialing in your process. And so to that end, there are a couple of things. One, you say that in the conventional flour category, because you suggest that people who are not familiar with baking, for example, start with using conventional flour, and that there are several brands that are available to them, anywhere in the States. But you make it real clear, as Katie already mentioned, that what they're probably going to hear from most sources is that they should use 00 flour. And you say, please do not use 00 flour for any of the recipes in this book. So let's start there.
Yeah, so 00 flour, again, is great marketing. And I don't think it's necessary, and it's certainly not preferred. Italy's a small country. There's worldwide demand now for this 00 flour imported from Italy. They don't grow the wheat there. They import the wheat from the big wheat producing countries. And the United States happens to be one of the biggest wheat producing countries. So why ship wheat grown here to Italy for them to grind it up into a powder and then sell it back to us and ship it all the way across the world twice? We have a fantastic climate for growing wheat here. We have great growers and millers here. So I think it's really important to support our local agriculture. Even if it's, from Kansas or Nebraska or North Dakota, it's still more local than getting it from Italy. The wheat is not better in 00 flour. It's just a milling fineness. There's a wide range of strengths, protein contents, protein qualities. And the recipes in this book are specifically designed around flours that are not 00 flour. So the recipes will not work for you if you use 00 flour.
And
it
another
absorbs
point,
water differently.
got it. And another point you make is that that people will probably also, if they're looking on YouTube or just searching, they will also probably find the words high gluten used a lot in association with making pizza dough. And you don't bake with high gluten flour. You make that real clear for your pizzas.
Definitely. Yeah, gluten is very difficult to digest. If you want to believe it or not, it is very difficult to digest. It is like a rubber band. And the less of it we can use, it leads to easier digestion, but also a better texture. Because gluten is like a rubber band, it's going to be more difficult to chew through the higher that gluten content is. And I like when it's tender and super crisp and easy to chew through. I want to shatter in my teeth when I bite into it.
Mm-hmm. So what's the best starting point for the beginning pizza maker? Are there going to be, I mean, I know you can get lots of different equipment, but what are the basics that everybody needs to have to approach this in a way that's going to ensure success if they put attention on it?
So in terms of equipment, you need either a baking stone, a baking steel, or some fire bricks that you can buy at any big box store. Your oven needs thermal mass. It needs to hold the heat, and then that heat's then transferred into the bottom of your pizza to make a crisp pizza crust. So you do need thermal mass. And then you just need a kitchen scale to weigh all your ingredients, because volumetric measurements like a measuring cups and teaspoons don't work here. It's not accurate. You'll get different results every time you use them. So we do recommend or require a kitchen scale. In terms of ingredients, King Arthur all-purpose flour or any white flour that you can buy at any supermarket is a good starting point. It'll be consistent, it'll be reliable, and you can, again, dial in your process for how to create pizza dough.
And I know some people are probably going to say, well, but I don't want to use white flour. Does it talk about really great stuff like, heirloom flour and red 5? Can I actually make a healthy pizza because I don't want to start with white flour? And I think that, you're definitely going to, have input on that. But I think that what you're trying to say is the place to start, if you're not familiar with baking, is with this white flour so that you can get a handle on it, as you said already. But whereas many people don't even discuss this whole option of using heirloom flours, you definitely do in the book.
Yeah. So our most complicated formula for dough is, we call it the choose your own adventure dough. It's basically, you can mill your own flour if you have a little tabletop mill, or you can use an ancient grain or a modern, interesting variety of wheat. And here's the techniques. Here's what you're supposed to be looking for.
Yeah, that's that. And then there's also the process. People say, well, what about sourdough? How does that fit into this whole process?
Yeah, so it's definitely not advisable to start with sourdough. But the flavors that you can extract out of the wheat through using natural fermentation are by far more delicious than using just commercial yeast and thyme. Plus, you get to nurture it. You get to take care of this sourdough starter that, for me, is very repetitive and routine. And there's something very special about nurturing something, especially during the pandemic when the world was going crazy, and we know we still have to feed our starter and take care of it, and we have input and we get to really take care of it. There's something beautiful about that.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, I'm kind of digressing for a second, but you just reminded me that I sent a friend of mine who got into baking, and got into making bread and pizza during the pandemic. I sent him the cover, the illustration of the cover of the book, and his response, he sent back to me an SMS. He said, "I have to say, that's the most beautiful pizza I've ever seen." so, so that's nice. So, all right, what about tomato sauce? Because you talked about it a little bit earlier, and you talked about ways to go about testing for, what might work for you. But how about just a little bit more information, like, cooked, non-cooked, added ingredients to it? What's your approach to that?
So the approach is to source the best ingredient that you can find. So finding that perfect, pristine raw material is the most important part. Then we try to stay out of its way, because you just source the best tomato. It was grown so carefully and canned so carefully that it would be a crime to ruin it by adding unnecessary ingredients. So we try to treat it simply by adding a pinch of salt and then controlling its moisture content. Moisture in the tomatoes is very, very important. And it kind of has to link up with your other ingredients that you have on top of the pizza. So a pizza that doesn't have any cheese baked onto it, right, is going to need, the tomato sauce needs to be a little bit wetter, a little bit more moisture in it, because it's going to reduce as the pizza cooks. Whereas a pizza that has, say, mushrooms on it and cheese, you need a tomato that has a lower moisture content because you have all that extra moisture from the mushrooms and the cheese. Mm-hmm. So one size does not fit all when it comes to tomatoes.
Mm-hmm. And I want to mention that in the book, there is a resource section so that it's been delineated, for people to make it a lot easier, to find some of the sources that Dan and Katie think are great for the different elements that go into a pizza. And I know that another thing that people are going to be, really concerned about, though, is, for example, mozzarella, because first of all, if you go to a regular grocery store, in general, you don't have too many choices. You find low moisture in the States. I'm talking about, low moisture skim mozzarella. Is that okay to use, for example, or what should people try to find?
So I always recommend buying every mozzarella that you can find, tasting them all, and determining which melts the best, which tastes the best, and which you feel great about supporting. But the real joy for me is in finding that local supplier, somebody who makes it themselves, somebody who feeds the cows every day, or milks the cows every day, and really understands it and is in touch with the agricultural component of cheese. Cheese is agriculture, and it all starts with the cow and the grass that it's eating. So part of the fun and the excitement is searching for that person who's making it, and they're everywhere.
Yeah, if you think there's no fresh mozzarella maker or small farm doing cool dairy in your town, you might be right, but you might be wrong, and you only find out by interrogating everyone your favorite pizza chef, your local farmer's stall manager. Just ask everyone, be irritating if you need to be, just find that mozz.
Yeah. And there's always new ones popping up.
Right.
I just got an Instagram message from somebody who's raising water buffalo and making cheese in Texas. And we're working right now to try to get me some samples because I want to taste it. Mm-hmm. I'm excited for them. I'm excited for them to be on this journey of trying to bring buffalo milk mozzarella to the United States, because it's really not here.
Mm-hmm. And the importance of salt.
Yes. Salt is so important. Every step of the process, from it's part of the pizza dough. It performs certain functions in pizza dough, like adding strength, adding flavor, controlling fermentation. That's one use of salt. We also always salt our ingredients that go on top of the pizza, whether it's, shaving zucchini and then salting the zucchini to help it exude some of the liquid and break down the cell structure. Salt is a major component of our fermented chili paste, that it, again, controls fermentation. So we salt chilies for 5 to 7 days before we grind it into chili paste. I love at the last moment before the bake, or even after the bake, of adding a couple of flakes of some coarse sea salt, so that every few bites you get this pop of salinity in your mouth, and it just brightens everything up. Salt is an essential ingredient for all cooking, especially pizza.
So, Katie, have you been anywhere in Rome? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit recently, that just stands out in your mind in terms of the pizza that's being made there, so you can give some people insight into that particular world?
For sure. There's a place called I Quintili. Now there are actually 2 pizzerias. COVID has fortunately been kind to at least one type of restaurant industry business, and that's the Roman pizzeria. Or more accurately, it's a Neapolitan guy who does a kind of take on Neapolitan pizza in Rome. And I Quintili just does like such beautiful, thoughtful fermentation, which is not a given in the Neapolitan pizza category. The toppings are really thoughtful and come from farms that the owner knows and cares about. So in a way has a lot of synergy with Dan's approach. It is a Neapolitan style, however, so it's going to have that not eggshell-like crust, but a little bit of a tough outer crust that gives way to the inner crumb, and then center that's a little bit more damp. But at I Quintili, they do a longer bake at a lower temperature, a lot like what Dan does, which does give you more structural integrity. So you can pick up a slice of I Quintili pizza, and that completely is not a thing that you can do in most Neapolitan places. So it's just like kind of changing small things from the format to make it an overall improved final product that's more pleasurable to eat. And I just think I Quintili is doing awesome things. There's one in Torbella Monica, which is out in the periphery. No visitor to Rome would ever go there. And then there's another, the Forio Camillo metro stop, which is, accessible on the same line as the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps, and the Vatican. It's freaking awesome. And because it's a Neapolitan place, they also do a lot of fried things. So fried pasta croquettes, fried potato croquettes. It's incredible, because you got to eat fried stuff before you have pizza, right? That's the rule here.
Absolutely. Dan, another just 2 words that really struck me when I was reading the book, when we were talking about the actual assembly and baking of the pizza, were the 2 words that be gentle. Mm-hmm. So could you just explain that a little?
I mean, I try to be gentle every step of the process. I think people tend to want to exert their sense of self onto whatever it is that they're doing. And whether it's stretching out the dough and using pressure that is too great, or too many physical movements, and just really trying to beat it, into submission. I just try to be gentle every step of the process, from stretching and folding to opening up the pizza dough to the sheer quantity of ingredients that you put on top of the pizza before you bake it. We really try to have balance and elegance and a little bit of grace when it comes to pizza.
I really like those words: balance, elegance, a little bit of grace. I think that if you observe, next time anybody goes out to, say, a local restaurant that specializes in making their own pizza, I'm not talking about a chain, but a local place where somebody's making their own pizza, I think that most of the time, my experience, I'm recalling, one that just stands out more than anything. There's a very famous pizzeria in Atlanta, and I just watched the guys making the pizza, and yes, it's very busy, so they're extremely fast in all their movements, but it's just like it's like they're listening to heavy metal, when they're doing it, and it's just like smash, bam, bang, that kind of thing. And then I compared it, and this is really helpful. I really appreciate this insight, because I compared it now to a friend of mine who's a pizzaiolo at a place, at a small, just a small town pizza place. And I took a video once of his hands, because it was just so beautiful, just watching him work that dough. And it was so gentle. That's the right word, actually. And so now, it's like, oh yeah, well, that must be one of the reasons that just, to me, tastes so much better. It has so much more joy, I'll say, that was put into it. So people don't get discouraged. You say pizza making is all about practice. Even after spending nearly half of my life obsessing over pizza, I still think of each bake as a learning opportunity. And I think that's kind of like the same thing, that we can apply that to anything we make, as professionals or as home cooks. And I know for my own self, I'm looking forward to this particular process of following some of the things that you have detailed between, your techniques and Katie putting it all into words, because as a home cook, I generally am just on the fly all the time. And people ask, well, what's your recipe? I don't have a recipe. I'm just on the fly. And I realized, though, that even though that's how I cook, my cooking could be elevated if I did spend more time on the process itself. So what this book has done for me is it's given me the inspiration to be more process oriented. And I really appreciate that. So I want to say thank you, for that. And I really do. It's an intention now for me to put more thought into the process and to be more detail oriented, which I think will probably would do me good in other aspects of my life too. So this is a really, there's a lot of life lessons in this book besides just learning how to make pizza.
It changed also my approach to pizza making too, because I used to make pizza all the time and it would be like chaos and just like not fun. And it's like, be gentle, slow down, gather your ingredients, prepare everything in advance. And it's like, it's such a game changer, because then you do the meditative thing of making sure all the cheese is torn and thinking about that, and getting your tomatoes ready and crushing them by hand and feeling that underneath your fingertips. And it's like this whole, you're getting in touch with your senses while also preparing something that's really ritualistic way. And it also cuts your prep time, because you're not doing a million things at once. You're focusing on one thing at a time and just like banging out your prep list, getting all your mise en place ready, and then you're off to the races. And it makes it such a more calm experience. It's so much more pleasurable when you can be making pizza, all your stuff is ready, and then you can like involve other people in it, because you're not like chasing down the like basil and I forgot where the mozz went. Like, it's so much, I think, more elegant and fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to just read again. We've talked about these different things Pete Wells described it, but I want to read the actual description in the book about your ideal pizza, because I think this could be helpful to people a little bit. I approach making the dough for pizza by naming my intention. I want to bake an exceptional pizza with a nice open crumb, a firm, crisp, fully brown undercarriage, a caramelized rim, uniform oven spring, and properly cooked toppings. I include even more specific intentions related to every step in a dedicated box at the beginning of each section, which we've talked about that a little bit. And I also keep the pizza evaluation rubric in mind with each step. And I love the fact that this is very, very specific in terms of all the different components, what you're looking for. I also love that you said in the book, or it was, I never know what to say, you said, you wrote, whatever. It's in the book, it says that get familiar with all this stuff and then do what you want. Yeah. Make these recipes better. I'm not telling you this is the only way to make pizza. And, put your own individual creativity into it. And I thought that was great.
Thank you.
Now, the last thing that I want to just discuss is, how have you seen this industry? Katie mentioned it a little bit already, that COVID's been kind to pizza restaurants in general. And I just wonder, have you seen any effects that you could say, this is really something that has actually brought a lot of positivity to my industry? Because the restaurant industry as a whole has been extremely difficult time, just like many other industries, but restaurants in particular. So what are the positive things that you've seen, the impacts that you've seen, and that you see as actually moving things forward as we hopefully find a way out of this at some point?
In terms of COVID, right?
Well, it doesn't even have to be in terms of COVID. It could be just where things are at in the industry itself right now. But sure, if you want to relate it to COVID too, either way, because it just seems like there continues to be a real evolution in this whole pizza making, really.
Yeah, and so in terms of COVID, I think one of the best things that's happened is that wages have increased, and our team is making more money than they ever have, and it's really fantastic. In terms of the entire pizza industry, I think that we're at a place where people aren't afraid to share information, and you see less of the secrets going on, and people taking the labels off of the cans of tomatoes that they're using because they don't want anybody to find out which tomato brand they're using or flour they're using. There's so much information out there, and there's a free flow of information. And that's a very, very good thing, because it's going to help everyone elevate their pizza that they're trying to produce.
Katie?
We all learn from each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same idea of like people connecting over pizza has now sort of transcended meeting around a table, and now they're connecting with pizza over, their shared social media posts. People who maybe never baked before are getting into baking, and therefore are developing a greater appreciation for the labor that goes on at their local pizzeria. And I think that there's just been such an improvement in the overall quality of pizza in America pre-COVID that's just continuing to snowball. And the more information people have, the more understanding people have by actually executing themselves, I think it's going to continue that demand, which is already present to some extent, but is increasing. And, I can comment, in Italy, a lot of pizzerias have been able to pivot during COVID because people were already accustomed to having pizza takeaway, whereas other forms of takeaway were less common. And they were accustomed to having like a sort of steamy, soggy pizza at the end of the line after it got delivered on a scooter. So people are already ripe for it. And a lot of pizzerias have figured out how to make a better final product when it arrives, especially running their ovens a little lower.
Yeah, that's a point that we did talk about a couple of times, but maybe just real quickly go back to that, because you do use a wood-fired oven at Razza, but that approach, Katie mentioned it, you mentioned it, is a little bit different than most people are familiar with, because it's always emphasized every time you read anything. It's like, what do you cook your pizza at? And it's 1,000 degrees, or whatever, and the point that you are making is that that's not necessarily the pizza that I'll say I think is the best. And I mean, in terms of the Razza type of pizza.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a million ways to do things. And the way I do things is, very well thought out. And I just want to bring as much happiness to our guests as possible, because that means I'm successful, is when we get to make people happy. And there's a million ways to do things. And Everybody makes their own choices. Yeah.
Do you see the industry continuing to evolve past the, we'll say and maybe this is a better question, for Katie, past the stodginess of the regulations that govern, especially Neapolitan pizza in Italy?
In Italy, there is always the opportunity to push past the dogma-driven VPN Neapolitan style certification. It's just kind of it's such a present thing, and it's something that requires a lot of courage to push against. So I don't see critical mass necessarily, but there's so many great pizzerias, especially outside of Naples, in Campania, that are able to do their own really pizza chef driven thing. It often revolves around a person. Franco Pepe is the quintessential example of this, where it's an individual whose like passion and charisma is able to convince people that this is a valid alternative. And it's been replicated elsewhere in Italy. And I think that will continue to grow, particularly because pizza is, when properly executed and when the pizzeria is managed properly, a very lucrative business here. So if there's money to be made, people are going to experiment and see if they can do it.
Yes, I'll quick aside, and then I want you to both tell people where to find you on social media, if you don't. We were staying above Verona. It's a long time ago, in this little town, Chiero Veronese, and there was a woman who had a pasticceria, and her brother had a pizza restaurant, and they were almost next to each other. They were like a block away. And almost every time, at least this is my memory anyway, almost every time we walked into the pasticceria, she was complaining about her brother, because she was saying, I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm making all these beautiful pastries, and I charge whatever €1 for them, and he's cutting out a rounded dough and he charges €8 for it. And I got such a kick out of that. Based on what you just said, it fit perfectly.
So funny. I love that.
So where can we find you, Dan, on social media?
Through Instagram at Dan Richer or at Razza NJ.
Okay, that's
also Dan, on Twitter and Facebook.
Okay, Dan Richer is DANRICHER, and at Razza NJ is RAZZNJ. Katie, what about you?
I'm at Katie Parla on all social media, and my website is katieparla.com.
That's KATIEPARLA. So that's easy. Thank you both so much. It was a real pleasure, and I appreciate everything that this book has done to bring me more joy, and I'm sure so many people will find the same experience.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Oh, a real pleasure. Been listening to Great Taste. I've been talking with Dan Richer and Katie Parla, the co-author. She's the co-author. Dan Richer is the man who owns Razza, and the book is The Joy of Pizza, everything you need to know. And so I'll just leave you with the same 3 little words I leave you with always, and those are anyway, cook with joy. Thank you guys so much.
That was so fun. Thank you.
That was great.
You.
If I can find the way to turn this off, which I'm so technologically oriented.